Good morning and welcome to this week's episode of Mystery, Murder, and Magic. We're your hosts, Andrea and Alex.
Yay. Episode.
Yay.
Yay.
And today, we're going to finish up talking about Aleister Crowley. But first, Alex.
Yes.
I want to talk about Saturday night.
Oh, yeah. I forgot for a second.
Oh, yeah.
We went somewhere.
Yeah, so Saturday night, Alex, Nicholas, and myself
Yes.
went to wrestling in Union.
We went to a wrestling event.
The promotion is called Pro Wrestling Union. And yeah, it's like a local organization, but there's like some really talented wrestlers.
Yes, there is.
In that promotion. It was crazy fun. Like, it was stormy on the way over there, so I was like, I don't know what going to be like. Dodging
We're gonna die,
or if we're gonna be watching wrestling, or I mean, if a tornado could have came, that ring was so big, they probably could have fit everybody under it to protect them from the tornado.
Probably.
That sucker. It was huge. It stood up off the ground. And anyway, we just kind of sat in the car until the storm passed. But
we were lazy.
We were late. Well, no, it was just that I wasn't.
I didn't want to die.
I didn't want to get struck by lightning. So, but the matches were like so awesome. We were sitting on the front row.
Yeah. We
sat on the front row, and so Alex got to see his longtime favorite, Dion.
Yes.
Dion Johnson.
Yes, indeed.
Alex has been a fan of his since he was like 9 years old. And let me just tell y'all what a cool guy Dion is, okay?
Yes.
You know, at one point when Alex was
a young lad,
yeah, it was before middle school, I believe.
Yeah.
He kind of was struggling a bit in school. He kind of was unmotivated, and I didn't know what to say or do because I had already said and did so much. So I reached out through Facebook to Dion. I told him what was going on with Alex. And let me tell you what Dion did. Dion wrote
a note
about, I don't know, it was about a 4-page letter.
Yeah.
To Alex and mailed it to him. And I don't remember what he said exactly in there, but it was very encouraging to Alex, and apparently whatever he said got through to him, because he definitely turned himself around. So, you know, I have to just say thank you, Dion. I don't know if you ever will hear this, but thank you, Dion. You're an awesome dude.
You're a cool lad.
And I'll never ever forget that act of kindness. But it probably was a small thing to him, but it was just one of those big things that stand out in your lifetime, you know. Now, also, back when Alex was about 9 years old, I took a picture of Alex holding Dion's championship belt. Well, last night, they crowned a new champion with a brand new title. It's called the PWU Carolina's Champion. And before the fatal 4-way match for that championship, there was an intermission. And during it, you could, like, have your picture taken with the new belt. And let me tell you, that belt is so pretty.
Yeah.
Like, I think I like it so much because, like, right, that front plate on the belt is the state of South Carolina. And it's just so pretty. So you could go up, get your picture made with it. So what I did was take Alex's picture with that belt, and we were in hopes that Dion was going to win that title. So, you know, it would mean even more to him. But that didn't quite work out because not long after that fatal 4-way match got started, Dion got counted out, and it was funny because big shout out to Darren Vanderford for grabbing the chair. Look, when he grabbed that chair beside your brother, Nicholas looked at me like, what's about to happen? But he whacked Dion in the back with that, and they took off. It was hilarious.
It was funny.
It was funny. But the other people that was in the match, okay, so it was Dion, a dude named Bebop.
Bebop's cool.
It was a guy they called the Anomaly, and I think his last name was Morgan.
Yeah.
And there was a guy named, I think his name's Drew Hood. I do know that when they announce him, they say DH and H Hood. I mean HD. DH and HD. It's a good thing I don't do the ring announcements because I just screwed it up. Of course, he was making everybody do the ring announcements over last night anyway. So, anyway. Long story short, because I know y'all aren't here for the wrestling stories, but Bebop won, and it was a great match.
Yeah.
Now, before I wrap this up, I do want to give a big shout out to, like I said, Derek Vanderford. He is an awesome manager. Like, it just suits him. Like, him running his mouth as a manager. It kind of made me think, in some ways, of Don Callis running his big mouth. But not quite. And you know how I feel about Don Callis. Well, since I kind of know Derek, I don't feel that hate towards him. So,
yeah.
But, I mean, he just does the manager thing so good. And Cole McAbee, now, I don't know if any of y'all are listening, but if you are, I gotta give you mad respect, because, like, you're putting on, and all of y'all are just putting on this awesome thing for the area. You know, it gives us something to do on some Saturday nights.
Yeah.
And it's entertaining. It's a safe environment unless you're in the ring. Like, and y'all don't, like, overcharge, like, on your ticket prices or your snacks, you know, like your drinks. I mean, some places you go, you're going to pay an arm and a leg for a drink, but, you know, not y'all. But anyway, big shout out. Y'all did a stupendous job last night, and we can't wait to go to the next show. And since I'm already talking about it, the next show is going to be held on September 25th in Spartanburg. Now, you can find more details about it on the Pro Wrestling Union Facebook page, but that it's going to be a benefit show. So, it's well worth, you know, spending your money on. But I'll link that Facebook page that I mentioned to ours, so it'll be easy for you to find. So,
anyways.
Well, Alex, you ready to talk about this week's episode?
I guess.
Episode. Well, let's do it. Alright, so now that we got that out of our system, I'm going to do a quick recap just in case you missed anything last week or you just missed the whole episode. So, Alistair was born to these very devout Christian parents, but he rebelled against that and them because of the Christianity. His father died when he was really young, and he called that a life-changing experience. And he inherited a big fortune from his father's death. Now, he attended, like, several schools, and then he was eventually educated with a private tutor because his behavior was so bad at these schools. I guess they just decided to pull him out. Now, while he was a student at Cambridge University, he was very sexually promiscuous. And during that time, he discovered that he was bisexual. He loved playing chess, and he was very good when it came to mountain climbing. And that's something to discover in college.
Yeah.
Some years after university, he joined the Golden Dawn, but he was kicked out when he and his mistress tried to seize a temple at the request of his friend Mr. Mathers. And that's in no relation to Marshall Mathers or Jerry Mathers, that was known as Leave It to Beaver Dude. Okay, so I just want to clarify that. In 1903, Alistair married a girl by the name of Rose Kelly, and while they were honeymooning in Cairo, Egypt, he had this sort of an awakening that, and he got in touch with a deity or the spirit named Alwas, I believe was his name. And when he was in contact with that, it gave him what he needed and prompted him to write the Book of Law. Well, in 1905, he had his first daughter, but she died shortly after that from typhoid. Then he had a second daughter who was born in 1907, and she was named, okay, and get this, after an actress that Alistair had an affair with. He named his kid after a woman that he had been messing around with. That brings us up to speed, and we can continue on. So at this point in Aleister's life, he was performing these rituals. With his former mentor. His name was George Cecil Jones. And Aleister claimed that by doing this, he established with Godhead. And he said this was a major... I thought I heard our Alexa. He said this was a major turning point in his life. Damn, I said her name. I'm surprised she didn't come on.
Alright.
But anyway, this was a major turning point in his life. But y'all see how easily distracted I am. And when they would perform these rituals, they would heavily use hashish, which is basically a drug made by compressing and processing certain parts of the cannabis plant. As a matter of fact, he wrote an essay called The Psychology of Hashish. It's hard to say, hashish. That the drug was truly a big help when it came to mysticism. I bet it was. Towards the end of 1907, he says that he was contacted again by Aleister, and Aleister dictated 2 more attacks to him. Dude had a lot to say, huh?
Yeah.
And both of these would be later known as the Holy Books of the Lima. Before that year ended, Aleister wrote several more additions to this, and he claimed that he had supernatural help with this, saying that the supernatural was his source. Now, around this time, his inheritance from all those years ago when his dad passed away was starting to run out. So to earn money, he was hired by George Bennett to protect him from witchcraft. But Aleister realized that Bennett's paranoia over witchcraft was because he was like addicted to cocaine really bad. And so it caused his paranoia, and Alex is laughing, but
that's funny.
It's not funny.
I can't say that word. It's not funny.
It's sad, but it just, when you say that, like, he realized his paranoia was because of it. I mean, he's freaking out about witchcraft because he's high on cocaine. But anyway, so Aleister took this man to France and Morocco to help him, like, get off of those drugs, or get off that drug. Now, one of these students, he took on, like, these other students, too, that, to help them, like, learn about the occult and magic, and so that he could earn money in return. And one of these students was a guy by the name of Victor Newberg. And Mr. Newberg became Aleister's sex partner. And in 1908, the two visited northern Spain, and then they traveled to Morocco. And the next year, the two stayed at Bolskine, which was a house that Aleister owned. And the two practiced sadomasochism. And Aleister continued to write poetry and attempted to write an autobiography called The World's Tragedy. And around this time, he realized that short horror stories were a popular thing. So he started writing his own. That's one thing I'm going to look into, is to see what these were. And some of those are even published. So like I said, I'm going to check those out. But let's go back to 1907 for a minute. Now, in 1907, Aleister and George Cecil Jones decided to form an occult order with the basis that it was a successor to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and they called it the AA. Their headquarters and temple was located on Victoria Street in central London, and it used a lot of the teachings and beliefs of the Golden Dawn with added touches from the Thelemic ideals. It was quite popular from the beginning, and many people joined. In 1909, Aleister started producing a biannual publication called the Equinox, and he built it to become the official organ of the AA. And later in 1909, Aleister, now see, up until this time, he was still with Rose. But he had had enough of her drinking, and so he divorced her. But he left the little girl Lola in her care. And the couple remained friends, and she continued living at Bolskine until her alcoholism reached like an all-new high, and she was institutionalized in the fall of 1911.
Lord.
So I feel like he still cared about her. He was pretty much taking care of her because he gave her a place to live. And then when her drinking was just way beyond control, he had her institutionalized to try to get help.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like he cared about her, but he just couldn't deal with her drinking, you know. Now, shortly after his divorce, Alistair and Newburgh traveled to places such as Algeria, and they took several desert tours at different places. Alistair recited the Quran every day of the trip, and as we all know, the Quran is basically, in a nutshell, the Bible of Islam. In 1910, when he returned to London, he found out that Mathers was suing him for publishing Secrets of the Golden Dawn in the Equinox. Y'all, I just woke up from a nap. But anyway, when it went to court, the court ruled in favor of Alistair. During the court proceedings, the press really sensationalized it all, and then that in turn made Alistair even more popular, and he enjoyed all the attention. And he really played up the stereotype of being a Satanist and as being a supporter of human sacrifice. But in reality, he was neither of those things. He didn't support human sacrifice, and he said he wasn't a Satanist. Now, all the publicity brought in a lot of new members for the AA, and Alistair decided to expand his teachings to a bigger group of spectators, so he developed something called the Rights of Artemis. And what that was a public performance of magic and symbolism. And his members of AA, now we're not talking about like Alcoholics Anonymous, this is a totally different AA. But anyway, members of AA portrayed different deities, and the first performance was held at the AA temple. Well, the people that attended to watch were given this fruit punch that was spiked, and I believe I'm pronouncing this right, but it was spiked with peyote?
With P.
To enhance their experience. And what peyote is a type of cactus, and there's a drug that's derived from it that contains psychoactive alkaloids. So it was to enhance their experience while watching this production. Now, Alistair received almost rave reviews, so the following fall he produced something similar called Rights of Artemis. I think that's how you pronounce it. Eleusis. But it wasn't the success that the previous production had been. And the editor of the newspaper called The Looking Glass, called Alistair one of the most blasphemous and cold-hearted villains of modern times. The article he wrote about it suggested that Alistair and Jones were involved in homosexual activity. Now, Alistair didn't mind him saying all this, but Jones sued the man for libel. And after this, Alistair and Newburgh went back to Algeria to practice more magic work. Now, later, they went to Paris, or at least Alistair went to Paris, and he met a lady by the name of Mary Dasty. And she became his next Scarlet Woman, and the two of them practiced magic in St. Moritz. And he even believed that one of the chiefs, named Apple juice. Anyway, Applediz was speaking through Mary. And based on what she had said was while she was in a trance, and he wrote. Look, I'm just going to start that part over.
Let's just start
because it makes absolutely no sense what I just told y'all. Okay, so he saw this chief named Applediz, and he was speaking through Mary, and while she was in a trance, and he wrote what was a book called Book 4. And I should tell you here that it was during this time that he began spelling magic as M-A-G-I-C-K, like we spell it in the name of our podcast.
Get it?
To differentiate between the paranormal phenomenon type of magic and on stage pulling a rabbit out of a track magic, M-A-G-I-C. So he did that. He added that K on the end of magic to differentiate between magic and magic.
Magic.
If that makes sense.
Magic.
Magic and magic.
Magic.
In the early part of 1912, Alistair published the Book of Lies, and a German occultist named Theodor Roos accused Alistair of publishing some secrets of his own occult order. But Alistair convinced him that it was just a coincidence, and then the two became friends. I think it's nice when people work out things like that, don't you, Alex?
Yeah.
Now, the occult order that was Roos's was called the OTO. And soon after the two became friends, Roos appointed Alistair as the head of the British branch of the OTO. And that branch was called the Mysteria Mystica Maxima. And at a ceremony in Berlin, Alistair picked the magical name of Baphomet, and he was proclaimed as ex-supreme rex and sovereign Grand Master General of Ireland, Iona, and all of the Britons. All of the Britons.
All of them. Every single one.
Alistair got busy advertising the MMM and rewriting many of its rituals with Roos's permission, of course. But before he rewrote the rituals, they were heavily based. I feel sorry for the people who haven't listened to this. They were heavily based on Freemasonry, but when he got done with them, they were more Thelemic, and this caused a stir within the organization. Now, we all know how sexual Alistair was, so he was very fascinated by the OTO's attention to sex magic. So Alistair came up with magical workings based on anal sex.
Of course, why not?
Of course he did, right? And worked it into the curriculum for the OTO members who had been initiated into the 11th degree of the order. Yeah. In the spring of 1913, Alistair was the producer of the Ragged Ragtime Girls. And that was a group of all-female
violinist.
There you go. You want to come do this?
No.
Because I sure ain't doing too good. Okay. But as Alex said, they were all-female violinists that
I feel like that's still not right.
It's violinists. They performed in London, and then they did a 6-week stint in Moscow. Well, while they were in Moscow, Alistair took part in a sadomasochistic relationship with Annie Ringler. But that's not all he did while he was in Moscow. He also wrote plays and poetry that included Hymn to Pan and Gnostic Mass. And Gnostic Mass was a Lima ritual that became a part of OTO ceremony. The following January, Alistair and New York. I feel like I should just start this whole thing over. Alex looked at me like, no, keep going, Mom. We like making fun of you. But anyway, the following January, Alistair and Newberg moved into an apartment in Paris, and for 6 weeks, they performed the Paris Working. And what the Paris Working was a very impassioned ritual that used strong drugs and invoked the gods Mercury and Jupiter. Sex magic was part of this ritual, and at times they were joined by a journalist named Walter Durante. Alice was inspired by the results of this ritual, and he wrote a book called Liber Agave, and that meant an essay on sex magic. But after that ritual, Newberg started distancing himself from Alistair, and when they had an argument, Alistair cursed him, and I'm not talking about like curse as in a cuss word. I'm talking about he put a hex on Newberg. Oh. So there's that.
There's that.
Now that brings us to 1914. And by now, Alistair is basically dirt poor.
He's poor.
And he's living off of donations from the AA and due payments that were made to the OTO. Well, for financial reasons, in May of that year, he deeded over the ownership of the Bolskine house to the MMM. And by summer, he was mountain climbing.
Oh.
You sign over your house and then you go mountain climbing. Well, it was in this time that the First World War broke out.
The first one.
The first one.
The very first one.
Now, he had a short illness, and after he recovered from it, he sailed to the U.S. When he arrived in New York City, he moved into a hotel and started writing for Vanity Fair. That's still a magazine to this day, I believe. He also earned some money by doing freelance work for an astrologer named Evangeline Adams. He professed to be of Irish descent and said he was a supporter of Irish independence from Britain. He took up support in Germany in their war against Britain and became heavily involved in New York's pro-German movement. A German spy named George Sylvester Viereck hired Alistair to write for his paper called The Fatherland. Years later, this brought Alistair under much scrutiny, and he was called a traitor for his stance against Britain. But in reality, he was working as a double agent, and at one point, he carried out a publicity stunt right in front of the Statue of Liberty. Now, his intention was to make the German lobby look nuts in the U.S.'s eyes, and some have even said that it encouraged the German Navy, or that he encouraged the German Navy to destroy the Lusitania, that was like a passenger ship, by telling them it would ensure that the U.S. would stay out of the war, but he was actually hoping that it would bring the U.S. into the war as an ally for Britain.
Okay.
Around that time, he entered into a relationship with Jean Robert Forrest, and together they toured the West Coast. The North America headquarters for the OTO was located in Vancouver, and it was there that he met Charles Stansfield Jones and Wilfred Talbot Smith to discuss spreading the Lima across the continent. When he returned to New York, he became friends with Ananda. Now, this name, I'm going to tell you, it's a hard one, but I'm going to do my best to bring this name to you.
Absolute best.
His first name was Ananda, Ananda, but his last name is Kumaraswamy.
I agree. This is what I agree.
And his wife, Alice Richardson. Well, Alistair and Alice did some sex magic.
You.
Well, soon after that, she realized that she was pregnant.
Pregnant!
But then she miscarried the baby.
Aw.
Later on that same year, he took what was called a magical retirement in a lake cabin.
He magically retired.
I would like to do that.
He's a magician.
But anyway, he went to a lake cabin owned by Evangeline Adams. While he was there, he was heavily into drugs, and he took part in a ritual. And after that ritual, he announced himself as Master Therion.
Oh.
He also wrote a few literary works while there, including a written criticism called The Gospel According to Bernard Shaw. Well, that winter he moved to New Orleans, which he said was his favorite U.S. city. And at some point after that, he moved in with a lady named Roddy Minor, who would become his next Scarlet Woman. The two performed rituals, and through these rituals, he believed they had contacted a preternatural being called Lamb. His relationship with Roddy ended shortly after that. In 1918, Alistair decided to take a magical retreat on this island that was on the Hudson River. Once he was back in New York, he moved to Greenwich Village, and he took this lady named Leah.
Yeah.
Her name's Leah Herzig. Y'all, I'm so sorry. As his lover and his next Scarlet Woman. He took up painting as a hobby and displayed his artwork at the Greenwich Village Liberal Club. And somewhere along the way, he got the sympathy of the Freemasons, and with their financial assistance, he revived the Equinox.
Correct.
He spent the middle part of 1919 on a mountain. It's like every time he gets ready to do something, like every time he does something financially, it's like then he's got to go climb a mountain. But anyway, he was on a mountain climbing vacation in Montauk, and in December he returned to London. Well, when he got to London, this tabloid writer decided to attack him, not physically, but in the tabloid paper, saying that he was a traitorous scum because of his work with the German war effort. Some of his friends urged him to sue the paper, but he decided it wasn't in his interest to pursue that. And he became very sick with asthma, so a doctor prescribed heroin for it. And Alistair became addicted to it. In January of 1920, he moved to Paris and he rented a house with Leah. And it was around this time that he started tossing around the idea of a community of followers of the Lima, and he called it the Abbey of the Lima. He chose a location in Sicily, Italy, and soon after arriving there, he started renting the Villa Santa Barbara as the Abbey for his commune. After moving there with Leah and another woman named Ninette Shumway, along with Shumway's children, he described their life as his idea of heaven. They wore robes, and at several preset times throughout the day, they would perform rituals to the sun god Ra, and occasionally they would perform the Gnostic Mass. The rest of the day, they could pretty much do whatever they wanted, so Alistair continued to write and paint. And as far as the children's education, he was quite the libertine about it. And he even allowed them to witness sex magic.
That's so weird still.
It's an odd thing, yeah. Sometimes he would visit Palermo to visit supplies, and those supplies included drugs, and he would visit male prostitutes while he was there. His drug addiction was at an all-time high at this point, including his use of heroin and cocaine had started rotting out his nasal cavity. They really weren't doing much cleaning at that commune either, and there was like wild dogs and cats running in and out of it, which contributed to the mess of making it nasty, and it became like unsanitary.
Yeah.
New members had started arriving to join them and be educated by Alistair, and one of the new people that showed up was an actress named Jane Wolfe. She moved there in July of 1920, and shortly afterwards she was initiated into the AA, and she became Alistair's secretary. Another new member was a man named Cecil Frederick Russell, and he didn't agree with the same-sex magic, so they would often get into arguments, him and Alistair. And after only being there for like a year, Russell left the commune because they just couldn't get along. Well, in February of 1922, Alistair traveled back to Paris to attempt to kick his drug habit, but unfortunately he wasn't successful. He was getting desperate for money, so he moved on to London, where he wrote a novel and an article for the English Review. He was strongly criticized by the Sunday Express for his novel, and they called for that book to be burned.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Later, a young follower of the Lima named Raoul Loveday and his wife Betty May, they moved to the commune. Loveday was a staunch supporter of Alistair's, but Betty May couldn't stand him, and she couldn't stand living at the commune either. I mean, and I can imagine if it was still unsanitary, I wouldn't want to live there neither. But anyway, while they were there, her husband, Mr. Loveday, he got a liver infection from drinking there was a stream that was contaminated with Lord knows what. But he got a liver infection from drinking out of it, and he died. Well, when she returned to London, she began to tell her stories to the press. She told of having to drink the blood of a sacrificed cow, and there was other atrocities that she told them about. John Bull, now he wasn't an actual person, but a personification in England, called Alistair the wickedest man in the world and a man we'd like to hang. Alistair said that the accusations were lies and slanderous, but he was broke and he couldn't afford the legal fees to sue. Well, Mussolini heard of what Alistair had going on there, so he had him deported.
Oh, God.
Which was, not a bad thing, because he had people living in bad conditions.
Mm-hmm.
People died because of it, or at least one person died because of it. But after he was deported, he and Leah went to Tunis, and he was still in bad health, but he was trying again to give up his drug addiction. But again, he was unsuccessful, and during this time, he began writing the Confessions of Aleister Crowley, which was like an autobiography. Well, fast forward a couple of years.
Whoa, we fast forwarded 2 years.
Hello.
That was crazy.
I know.
Whoa.
Well, Alistair claimed that Roos had named him the head of the OTO if and when Roos passed away. But this was soon challenged by a German OTO leader named Heinrich Trenker. At a conference in Germany, prominent leaders Karl Germer and Martha Kunzel pushed for Alistair's leadership, but others were backing Trenker, and this caused the OTO to split. Well, Alistair moved back to Paris in 1926 and took on a ton of lovers during this time. His health started declining, and most of this was brought on by his addictions to heroin and cocaine. Around this time, Alistair also wrote Magic in Theory and in Practice, but it didn't receive much attention at that time. That same year, he met a lady from Nicaragua named Maria Teresa Sanchez. But soon, he was deported again from Paris. So, I mean, it's like everywhere he was going at that time, he was deported. But the reason he got deported from Paris was because authorities there just didn't like his reputation. And they were also afraid that he might possibly be a German spy. Well, Maria couldn't join Alistair in Britain unless they were married, so they got married in August of 1929. Shortly after that, Mandrake published and agreed to publish his autobiography in a limited edition 6-volume set. They also published his novel called Moonchild and also a book of short stories that he had written. But before all of the Confessions by Crowley could be published, Mandrake went into bankruptcy. And in a plot twist to all of this, the owner of Mandrake, who was a man named P.R. Stephenson, wrote a book called The Legend of Aleister Crowley based on the press coverage that surrounded Alistair. In September of 1930, Alistair traveled to Lisbon in Portugal to meet with the poet Fernando Pessoa. And while he was there, that's what he did, Alex.
What did he do, Mother?
I thought it would be a good idea to fake his own death. For what reason, I don't know. I couldn't find what reason he had. But now, I mean, if you're doing those drugs, you don't really have to have a reason to do anything. So he got that poet named Fernando Pessoa to help him. And he did this at the Boca do Inferno, which is a rock formation in Portugal. But then he reappeared 3 weeks later at an exhibition of his art in Berlin. 3 weeks later, he's alive.
Three.
In 1931, he moved on to a new lover named Bertha Bush.
Bertha.
What is wrong with you?
My name is Bertha.
Well,
I don't like that name.
Well, that is just mean.
I'm joking. If all our Bertha fans are there, I'm sorry. I love you. Continue.
Well, anyway.
You didn't hear that.
God, Alex.
Stupid.
I'm never going to financially recover from this.
Welcome.
They had a very brutal relationship, and often they would attack each other. I just imagine, like, and in this corner, Bertha, and they ring the bell and they fight. But anyway, he would continue to have multiple affairs with both women and men. And soon he left Bertha and went to London, where he took Pearl Brocksmith as his next Scarlet Woman. At this point, Alistair was getting desperate for money again, so he launched a bunch of lawsuits where he claimed people had libeled him, and some of those cases were successful. One of the most famous
Correct.
courses.
Cat courses?
Court cases.
Oh, okay.
Out of this was when he was suing Constable and Company for publishing a book called The Laughing Torso. Alistair claimed that the book libeled him by saying that his occult practices were black magic. So he got upset and sued over that. Well, he lost that case.
He did.
So instead of making money from all of these court cases, it further messed up his financial issues. Like, it made it worse. By 1935, he was declaring bankruptcy.
Correct.
Alice, you act like you know all this.
I'm smart.
Sounds like plankton over there. Correct. During the hearing for his bankruptcy, it was told that he had been spending 3 times his actual income. Sounds a lot like me, don't he? Spend more than you got, because it ain't gonna do you no good to be here anyway. Okay. Who is that? After this, Alistair developed a friendship with a lady named Deidre Patricia.
Deidre.
Alex!
That's a funny name!
It's not funny.
Deidre?
I'm not cooking you any supper.
Okay.
Anyway, he became friends with a
like that
lady named Deidre Patricia Doherty. And she just offered him to have a baby for him.
Whoa!
It's very personal. But anyway, the baby boy was born in May of 1937, and they named him Randall.
Rant.
In 1937, he gave a series of public lectures on yoga in Soho,
Yoga.
and he was mostly living off of contributions by the OTO's lodge in California. It was also around this time that Alistair became fascinated with the rise of Nazism in Germany, and he believed that Hitler just might convert to the Lima when the Nazis ended the German OTO and imprisoned his friend Germer, who later ran away to the U.S. In yet another plot twist,
Whoa.
Alistair verbally attacked Hitler. That's pretty brave, I think. And called him a practitioner of black magic. In 1940, Alistair's asthma got a lot worse. And this is something that I can sympathize with because I have asthma too, and it's a struggle. And like, since it's been so hot and humid lately, oh my Lord, it's just a struggle to breathe. And it's one of those things that I wouldn't even wish like on my worst
enemy.
Really. But because of World War II, Alistair couldn't get his asthma medicine that was produced in Germany. So guess what? He started using asthma. I mean,
he used
he
asthma.
started using heroin again. Now, I didn't know that heroin had ever been used to treat asthma. I mean, I'm not interested in like using the that for my asthma.
Using the asthma.
I'm not. But anyway, when he started using it again to treat his asthma, he got addicted again.
Addicted.
But I'm sure, I mean, I hate to, like, be understanding of it, but, I mean, if he couldn't get his regular medicine because of the war, I mean, I can understand why he did it, because he had to have something to relieve him from his asthma, you know?
Yeah.
Well, when Germany started bombing London, Alistair temporarily relocated to Torquay, and while he was there, he was hospitalized for his asthma. So, see, it was pretty bad. When he returned to London, he met up with an OTO initiate named Lady Frida Harris, and they began plans to design a tarot deck.
Pterodactyl.
He came up with the actual, like, design, and she painted them.
Ooh, color.
Yeah. In 1944, he took up residence at the Netherwood boarding house. And over the next couple of years, he had a lot of visitors come to see him there, including Deidre Doherty and their son, Randall. But he also made some new friends there. And that's where he spent out the rest of his life, because on December the 1st, 1947, Alistair passed away at the age of 72 there at that boarding house. He had been suffering from chronic bronchitis, which was exacerbated by pleurisy and myocardial degeneration. Now, I'm not sure what that was. His funeral service was held on December 5th at the crematorium, where Lewis Wilkinson read selections from Gnostic Mass. the Book of the Law and hymn to Pan. The funeral was attended by about a dozen people. And listen, Alex, this is the part I really want you to pay attention to and see if you can make the link.
Ooh, okay.
The press dubbed it as the Black Mass.
I get it.
You get it? Okay. So, do you see what I was talking about? Alistair / Malachi Black. When we were talking before we started recording, I told you, I was like, there's something I want you to see if you can make the connection. And there it is. So, that's where Black Mass came from. And you see his name was out. They called him Alistair when he was in that other promotion, which we dare not name. His body was cremated, and his ashes were sent to Carl Germer, who was still in the United States. And Germer, he buried his ashes in his garden. Now, like I said last week when we first started talking about Alistair, I told you he was a very interesting man. I told you there was a lot to the man. I mean, his life was literally multifaceted. I'm not sure if I should have been afraid of him instead of being fascinated by him. I mean, he's not into stuff that I would do, but I can see some of his way of thinking, and he was just totally different than people of his time. He's totally different than most of the people of our time now. I think when people think differently, I think people are afraid of people that think different than them.
Yeah.
So, that's basically what was going on with Aleister. So, anyway. That is all I have about Alistair. Now, I did probably leave some stuff out. But, like I said, there's a lot to this man. There's several interesting books about Alistair if you want to read more about him. But, that's all I've got for today. Alex, you got anything to add at this point? No.
Well, she was right.
Huh?
You're right.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, since Alex has nothing to say, I'm going to wrap it up. Come back on Wednesday for the Midweek Mini and on Saturday for the Weekend Weird Files. I don't know what we're talking about on either one of those yet, but I'm sure it'll be cool. Y'all keep it freaky out there, y'all.